Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about qualified plans. Now, this is a question that I get all the time. Should I be contributing to my qualified plan? Now, what are qualified plans? Well, there's lots of different qualified plans out there, and some of them are a little bit different than the other ones. So we have what are called ERISA plans, and ERISA plans are 401ks, 403bs, TSPs, 457s, defined benefit plans. These plans are quite different than individual retirement accounts. And the question that's frequently asked is, well, do I put money in the company plan? Well, that depends. Does the company plan have a match? There's a lot. And I'm going to go into this in depth with each and every one of these. So let's just talk a little bit about these different types of plans that there are. The ones that you would know most commonly, there would be a 401k. So 401k, sometimes referred to as a CODA or a cash deferred arrangement, is a type of profit sharing plan. Participants have the choice of either participating and then the company can put in matches, etc. Now, in addition to that, we have traditional IRAs. This is an individual retirement account. There's different rules for how much we can put inside of it. We have Roth IRAs. Now, Roth IRAs is a class all by itself. We'll stay away from those for a second. Annuities are actually, believe it or not, even though they're probably not qualified plans, if you're putting in money in after taxes, they're tax deferred as well, although we can put our qualified plan in an annuity. 403bs, frequently qualified plans, defined benefit plan. This is more commonly known as a pension, all right? And this is something that's coming back more and more every day. As a matter of fact, if you have a business, if you actually own a business, you should be talking to us about the tax benefits of a defined benefit plan as opposed to having a 401k or maybe in addition to having your 401k with your company. So let's move forward here and let's talk about how qualified plans work. Should we put money in qualified plans? And, overall, is it a good idea? Now, it's important to understand that qualified plans do two things. They defer the taxes, or what we like to quite really refer to as they postpone the taxes. Even though it's a deferment, it really is just a postponement. It's moving the money out to a later date. Now, in addition to that, what tax bracket will you be in when you retire? And this is probably one of the biggest fallacies out there. They tell you that you should put your money inside of a tax deferred account because you're going to grow on money you would have otherwise paid in taxes. And in the end, you're going to have more money because you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. Well, folks, I got news for you. You shouldn't be aspiring to get to a lower tax bracket unless you're managing to get every single dime you have into tax free, which is not, although not impossible, very, very difficult thing to do. Now, if you could get all your money to tax free, then your tax bracket would be zero and you could avoid taxes on your Social Security, things like that. But for most people, this is not something they're going to be able to do in their lifetime. So, thinking that you're going to be in a lower tax bracket when it comes time to retire, maybe not so much. You need to understand in order to retire, you have to have one thing, and that's a paycheck. And so for the average person, you're going to have Social Security, pension if you're lucky enough to have one, then maybe some rentals. Now, all of these things are subject to taxes. Then you're going to have a need and you're going to have a gap, and that's going to be made up by probably your qualified plans, also taxable. So when you get to retirement, you're going to need the same amount of money you need to live on today when you get there if you want to live in retirement. If you want to exist in retirement, sure, you'll be able to live on less. But you're going to need that money coming in on a regular basis, which will all be taxable. So the point is that chances are very well that your tax bracket in retirement will be equal to what it is today, if not equal, possibly higher. And there is the possibility that taxes would go up over time. That being said, what deductions will you have when it comes time to take money? Now, the other problem with this idea of going to be in a lower tax bracket when we retire is while we're accumulating money, Our three largest tax deduction is our children, our mortgage, which these days not so much, and our contribution to our qualified plans. Yet, when we get to retirement, hopefully we got rid of the children, so we don't have those as a tax write-off. We are probably have paid off our house. We got rid of that as a tax write-off, or they eliminated it with a standard deduction that's so high that it doesn't matter, and we're no longer contributing to a qualified plan. So even though we have less money coming in the door, we have less write-offs. So frequently we're right back to where we were as far as the tax brackets. So let's talk a little bit about tax thresholds throughout history. One of the things that you need to understand is that one thing that's for sure, change. Change will always happen. Now, would it surprise you to know that since 1913, the establishment of the IRS and the first taxable income, in 1913, the highest tax bracket was 7%. And by the way, that was meant to be a temporary tax. And at that point in time, you paid 1% in taxes if your income was over $20,000, and you paid 7% if it was over $500,000. So basically, they were really only taxing the rich at this point. Well, if you look through history, it goes down here and it goes 2, and then it's 2 at $2,000, then 67% at $2 million. And you go down here and you can see that down here, it got as high as 94%. In 1945, it was 23% if your income was over $2,000 and 94% if it was over $200,000. Now, throughout that time, we went out, and currently today, we are at a 10% on anything over $20,550. Now, these are married filing jointly, and 37% on anything over $647,850. So let's take this a little farther, and let's look at the history of taxes as we kind of just saw the thresholds. So you can see here that since that inception of the temporary income tax and the establishment of the IRS in 1913, the highest top marginal tax bracket has been 94%, with an average of 56.94%. Now, it would be important to understand some of the other things that go along with this. So let's take a look here at the national debt clock. Now, the national debt clock is a scary, scary thing, all right? If we look over here, we have a national debt as we speak of $34,862,929,000,000. And wait a second, it'll be 930 million. And before we're done with this presentation, it'll probably be about $940 million. That's how fast the national debt is going up as a result of how they spend the money and the interest that's being added to it. Now, if you look down here in the right corner over here, you see the unfunded deficit, which is $216 trillion. This number right here, this number in the last 3 years has gone up $18 trillion in the last 3 years. That ought to just scare the living daylights out of you. And now if you look up here at the top, you can see that our national budget is right around $4 trillion, $4.4 trillion is the amount of money that they actually bring in, but they actually spent $1.9 trillion more than they actually brought in. Now that ought to scare the living daylights out of you. Now folks, it's really easy to solve this problem. You just go down here and each citizen in America just simply has to write a check for $642,860 and the problem will be solved. Now obviously that's not going to happen, but at some point in time, they're going to have to take care of that deficit. So if we look throughout this here, you can see what's going on. Let's go here and let's take a look at the, how does all of this really work? Well, if we take a qualified plan and we postpone or delay or defer or whatever words you want to use with regards to those taxes and the tax calculation out to the future, what would that look like? Well, let's say that our annual contribution is today's limits, which is $7,000, okay? And we're just putting our money in an IRA. And let's say our current top marginal tax bracket is 30%, and our withdrawal rate is going to be 30%. It's not going to go down, and we're not going to withdraw for 30 years. So we're at 35 years old. We're starting to put this money away. We're going to make an average rate of return of 6%, which is a very reasonable number over time to be calculating at. And what that would say is that our balance at the end of that 30-year period of time would be $586,612. Now, the portion that you put in was $410,628. But here's the interesting part. You believe that you actually have $586,000, and the amount of taxes you saved by deferring those taxes was $63,000. But when it comes time to take it out, you're going to pay $175,000, almost 3 times what you saved. Now, that's pretty scary when you look at those numbers in that fashion. So it starts to question, is it actually worth delaying those taxes? Now, if we were to put that and we were to take it out at 20%, just as an example, what we would see is that the amount due to the IRS at this point would be $117,000. So we would actually, only pay about 2 times as much as we would have paid otherwise. So, whatever. You got to decide. Will you actually be in a lower tax bracket when it comes time to retire? Now, folks, when you sit down with us and we do a full-blown financial picture of where you're at, most people are quite shocked to find out that they're actually going to be not only in the same tax bracket, but frequently a higher tax bracket when they start taking their RMDs later on in life. And then what really shocks them is when they find out that when one of them dies, now they're in a higher tax bracket because now they have to file single. So how does your bracket at withdrawal affect your anticipated rate? So if you look here and you say, and I'm putting in $7,000 a year, all right, and my company is matching, let's say, for example, that they're matching $6,000, okay? So I'm putting in 7 and they're matching 6. Yeah, let's make that 5,000. Let's say they're putting in 5,000 and they're generally not that generous, okay? And I invested 6, and let's say that first 10 years I'm in a 22% bracket, and the second 10 years I'm in a 24% bracket, and the last 10 years I'm in a 30% bracket. Yeah, when it comes time to take it out, I'm in a 30% bracket. So if you take a look at this, in that first 10 years with that company match, my actual rate of return has gone up to 7.77%. My second 10 years, it's gone up to 9.05, and my third 10 years, it's 15.4. So the actual average over that entire 30-year period of time was not 6%, but it was 8.37 because of that company match. Now, what's the point of this slide? It's important to understand that if your company does a match and you're not taking advantage of that match, well, then you're making a mistake, all right? You need to be taking full advantage of the company match. But here is the real question. Should I be putting in this extra $2,000 up here above my match, or should I maybe look for a tax-free environment to put that in because my company's not matching it? And that one is the one that you really want to work on, okay? So let's talk once again about these top marginal tax brackets going forward. So you can see here that there's these turn of events. And remember, right, one of the things I told you that's just an absolute given throughout history, and that will be change. So you can see that we started off here at this very low tax bracket, and then during World War I, our top, this is World War I right here. Well, I don't know why it's not showing that, but that is World War I right there, okay? Down here, at that point, it was 77%, okay, on anything over $1 million. This down here was the crash of the stock market over there. And then over here, we had the Great Depression. We had that followed by over here, the top marginal tax bracket was a threshold of $5 million. Now, folks, this is really important. In 1 year, that threshold went to $200,000. So what this tells you is that the government can change the rules anytime they want. So then in the following year, during World War II, the top marginal tax bracket was 94%. Yes, 94%. Can you imagine living in the state of California with a 94% tax bracket? You would actually write a check for somewhere between 8 to 10% of whatever your account was to take the money out of your account, because your taxable rate would be somewhere between 108 and 112% taxable rate if you were in a 94% tax bracket. That's insane. And that is possible, incidentally. Okay? So over here, we have the Korean War, and that followed by the Vietnam War, or JFK rather. And then over here, we had the Vietnam War. And then down here, we had the Ronald Reagan era right here. And that was followed over here by the Gulf War. And that was followed by the Clinton years. So we had these tax cuts inside of here. And then we went over here and we had COVID, or the pandemic. And so the real question is, what's next? What do you suppose is going to be the next thing that's going to affect these tax brackets? Because remember, the one thing that's for certain is change. So how does a traditional qualified plan compare to that of a Roth qualified plan? So as of the new Secure Act, there are many changes to the ERISA plans, and most ERISA plans now have a Roth component to them. Now, it's important to understand that when you put money in a Roth in an ERISA plan, that you will end up not getting a tax write-off for that contribution, but you'll have to actually pay taxes on it. It's also important to understand to ask your plan administrator, can you put the company matches in the Roth portion? And if you can, then you have to pay the taxes on that. Some will, some won't. And then you could ask them, well, if they don't, can I actually do a conversion inside the plan? There's so many things that we would need to talk about, and we're not going to get them all covered inside of here. But if you just get little bits and pieces here, then you can understand why it would be important to sit down and do a plan. So once again, we have a $7,000 contribution here into this. Now, with a qualified plan, we literally could be putting away up to $30,500 this year, depending upon our age. So if we were putting away $30,500 into our qualified plan or our Roth qualified plan, what would that look like? Well, at a 30% tax bracket, it would be 30% over here and 30% of withdrawal and a 6% growth. In our tax deferred account, we would have over here a gross withdrawal amount of $2.5 million, $2,555,951. The amount of taxes due would be $766,785, and the actual net withdrawal at the end of the day would be $1,789,166. Now notice, they're exactly the same. See, folks, the only way you can win the tax-deferred game is you have to be able to take the money out at a lower rate than what you put it in at. If you take it out at the same rate, then in fact, that number will be exactly the same. But look at this. If we take it out at a higher rate, then at that point, you are about a $200,000 difference. So knowing what you know right now, knowing what taxes have been in the past and what changes have come along the way, what the national debt is, do you believe the taxes will be lower, higher, or same in the future? And here's the real question. Do you want to pay them? And if you don't want to pay them, then what exactly is your plan? What do you plan on doing to make sure that doesn't happen? And folks, the answer to that should be being proactive. We call it eating the elephant. And how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But you've got to be proactive to do that. And it's important to understand that right now, today, taxes are on sale. And in 2026, that sale's going away because the Trump tax laws will sunset. So let's say that we want to put money in a qualified plan and we want to compare that to a taxed as we go plan. So let's just say we start off with zero and we're putting away our $7,000 a year here. Okay, and our company matches $5,000. Okay, and our current bracket is 30 and 30 withdrawal 6 years later. We can see that if we took that $7,000 and we put it in the annually at those numbers, we would end up with $296,116. But by putting it in a tax deferred account plus picking up those contributions, our actual withdrawal amount is $703,934. Now, as you can see, not using that company plan match could be very, very hardening to your retirement. So the important questions to ask going forward are, one, what tax bracket will you be in at retirement? Now, if you haven't taken the time to sit down and meet with us and find out exactly where you are and exactly where you're going to be in the future, then you need to do that, because that's really important, because you can't do any good planning without actually having that information. And let me tell you, very rarely, I've never met a person yet that knew exactly where they were financially. I've had lots of people tell me that they did until they actually went through the process and got a really solid number on where they're at financially. And then never have I met a person who actually knew what their future looked like based on their current plan. They had some idea, they looked at some spreadsheet online, so on and so forth, but they really didn't ask the right questions. So what tax bracket will you be in the future? Most people are shocked to find out that their tax bracket without raising taxes will be the same and possibly higher. What deductions will you have when it comes time to take the money out? In other words, what is your exit strategy? When will you start taking money out of these qualified plans? And what tax rate will you pay when that time comes? Once again, people are quite shocked when they get to RMDs, required minimum distributions, to find out that they're in a higher tax bracket than they ever were before. And what is your exit strategy? Your exit strategy is the most important part of your plan. You really need to have an exit strategy, and very few people do. We do a very good job of going through life accumulating money. Over here, where the market's going up and down and up and down, and we don't worry about it. Time's going to be on our side, and it's going to come back. And the only reason why that works is because we have a paycheck. But when we get out here to preservation and distribution, the game changes, folks. Because you see, out here, if we've got $1 million and the market goes down, over here, it's no big deal. You just wait, it comes back. But over here, if we've got to be taking money out of our account every year, say we got to take out $60,000 and the market goes down 20%, we're not at $800,000, we're at $740,000. And because we're consuming that money in the process of our exiting years, we're not coming back. So it's important to have a plan. It's important to sit down and get a really good idea of where you are. And does it make sense to put money in these qualified plans? Frequently it does. But what do you do when the money you're putting in there shouldn't necessarily go there, but you want to get it to tax-free? Well, there's other ways to do this. There's ways to get it into tax-free that will change your life forever. I look forward to seeing you again, talking to you in the not too distant future. Remember to live like you're going to die tomorrow and plan like you're going to live forever. If you haven't done so, go below, subscribe to our channel. Please put in your comments. What do you think about? How much money should you put in a qualified plan? Should you use a qualified plan at all? Do you believe in the future Taxes will be lower, higher, or the same. And what is your plan to make sure you don't have to pay them? Keep smiling and make it a great day.